If there is one thing that is very clear in Kenya right now, it is that the government of William Ruto, the Ruto regime, has completely been cornered. It has run out of ideas. And one clear sign of this is the recent clampdown on the media, which the government has strongly denied. But there is too much evidence to prove that they are not telling the truth. And recent moves, which are clearly very desperate, that immediately tell a student of history that the end is not too far off. You see, history clearly tells us when a government gets to the place where this government has gotten to, the end is not very far off. History tells us that. History has told us that over and over again. In 1990, in July, there were the Sabasaba riots, which happened shortly after Kenneth Stanley Njindo Matiba and Charles Rubia had called a press conference that had shocked the world, calling for a resumption of multi-party democracy in the country called Kenya. The two were detained shortly after that, and after that, the Sabasaba riots broke out. And it looked like they would go nowhere. Moi was firmly in control. Daniel Toroitich arap Moi, the second president of Kenya. KANU was powerful and strong countrywide. And so the government heightened its clampdown, exactly as it is doing right now. Even journalists in the mainstream media started self-censoring themselves. It was the only way to survive. And this created a vacuum in the industry that birthed controversial magazines like Njehu Gatabaki's Finance magazine and Pius Nyamora's Society magazine, which did not self-censor the attacks on the Moi regime. Arrests followed, clampdowns followed. But in retrospect, something mind-blowing happened, especially when you look at the timelines. Because a very short 16 months later, Kenya changed forever. And in a shock move, Moi called a KANU delegates conference at Kasarani and declared that multi-party democracy would resume in Kenya. I was there, and I can assure you, if you had predicted after the Sabasaba riots broke out that in 16 short months Kenya would be back to multi-party democracy, people would have recommended that you have your head examined. But it happened. Fast forward to the present. The Ruto regime is behaving more and more like they don't understand the 2010 Constitution. Or maybe they are deliberately ignoring it, shoving it aside in their decisions. The acting Inspector General of Police banned protests in the CBD and its environs. Kenyans have gone to court. That order has been promptly rescinded, even as the matter goes into hearing. But it should be pretty obvious. You cannot uproot anything from the 2010 Constitution with a directive. That is impossible. I have had information for some time now that the mainstream media have been regularly warned about reporting live the ongoing protests countrywide. But then the Communications Authority Director General, David Mugonyi, a close ally of President Ruto, a bosom buddy of President Ruto, has now issued official communication to the mainstream media, warning them about live transmission of protests. Now, the role of free media in any democratic society is key. Indeed, this was pointed out by a statement issued by the US Embassy in Nairobi. But then there's something else that this government has completely missed. Amazingly. And it is just mind-boggling how they missed it. You see, it seems that they have forgotten that we're in the age of citizen journalism. People carry around smartphones, especially the Gen Zs. And therefore, even if mainstream media were to shut down today, as long as social media is still up and running, the impact would be minimal. And therefore, if you're a government struggling to survive, the last thing you'd want to do is to issue such a directive. Because human nature will kick in and things will be worse. Because people will be asking, why are the government frightened? What is it that they want to hide about the protests and demonstrations against this regime? In other words, it will heighten the interest on the protests and especially live coverage of the same. In other words, the government is cutting its own feet. And remember, multiple channels usually go live on YouTube. Granted, they may not have the same resources as a major TV station in Kenya today would have. But the combined coverage will at the end of the day deliver everything that Kenyans want to know in their bid to stay informed. And this is later broken down into shorter videos which people can consume, some of which are widely shared, and Kenyans can easily consume that and know exactly what is happening, assuming that all the major TV stations have been shut down. So it is an exercise in futility, even as it does great harm to the government of the day. And then there's the timing of the attack on Citizen TV, on social media, which comes very close in the heels of the incident in Nakuru, where a journalist took 3 recesses on their leg, and the very brutal arrest, mistaken identity allegedly, of veteran journalist Macharia Gaidho. Are all those coincidences? Can anybody convince you that they're just coincidences? Anyway, the latest attack on Citizen TV actually backfired very badly and boomeranged on the government, as Kenyans rallied their support behind the TV station, which has gained a reputation for very accurate, factual reports of what is really going on in Kenya. Moi's government in the 1990s was operating under the old constitution, but it was firmly in power, and it took just 16-17 months for the clampdown of that government to be defeated. How many months do you think it will take for the Ruto regime's efforts to be completely defeated and for change to come to Kenya? I don't think it will take 17 months. It will take a much shorter time. Government of national unity or no government of national unity. And I am more than a little surprised that that is not obvious. Now, I continue to thank all those participating in this season of gifting yours truly. You can see details on your screens right now. Asanteni sana, and God bless. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.